Some moments in life are so ordinary, so mundane that you barely register them. You walk into a room, greet a familiar face, and expect nothing more than the predictable rhythm of daily existence. And then there are others. A fleeting glance, a silent pause, a whisper of unspoken emotion that shatter your perception of reality and leave an indelible mark on your soul. I thought I was just visiting a friend. I was wrong. What I found instead was a gaze that promised a secret, a desire, and a story I was never meant to uncover. If you're intrigued by stories that delve into the unspoken and the unexpected, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. You won't want to miss how this unfolds. The late afternoon sun, a pale, watery gold, struggled to pierce through the persistent haze that clung to the sky over suburban Connecticut. It was one of those days in early autumn where the air held a deceptive warmth, but a chill wind promised colder days ahead. I remember the exact date, October 12th, because it was Orion's birthday, and I was heading to his parents' house for what I assumed would be a casual, low-key celebration. Orion and I had been friends since freshman year of college, navigating the labyrinthine halls of academia and the equally confusing landscape of young adulthood together. He was my anchor, my sounding board, the kind of friend who knew when to offer advice and when to simply listen. My beat-up sedan, a relic from my high school days, rumbled down the tree-lined street, the leaves already beginning to turn fiery shades of crimson and gold. The neighborhood was affluent, meticulously manicured, a stark contrast to the slightly more bohemian, student-filled streets near our university. Orion's parents, Augustus and Serafina, lived in a sprawling colonial house, its white clapboard siding gleaming under the muted sunlight. It was a house that exuded a quiet, understated elegance, a place where everything seemed to be perfectly in its place. I pulled into the driveway, parking behind a sleek, dark SUV that I recognized as Augustus's. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the small gift bag from the passenger seat, a limited edition graphic novel Orion had been eyeing, and headed towards the front door. I rang the doorbell, a melodic chime echoing from within. The door swung open almost immediately, and there stood Orion, a wide grin splitting his face. "Lysander, you made it. Come on in, man." Orion, with his perpetually tousled brown hair and an easygoing charm, pulled me into a quick, firm hug. "Happy birthday, buddy," I said, handing him the gift. "You shouldn't have, but I appreciate it," he chuckled, already peeking inside the bag. "The new Cosmic Drifter. You're the best." He led me inside, the familiar scent of cinnamon and something vaguely floral filling the air. The entryway was grand, with polished hardwood floors and a sweeping staircase. "Mum and Dad are in the living room," Orion explained, gesturing down a hallway. "Dad's probably got the game on and Mum's probably doing something domestic." He rolled his eyes playfully, a testament to the comfortable, slightly exasperated affection he held for his parents. As we walked towards the living room, I could hear the low murmur of voices and the distant sound of a sports commentator. Orion pushed open the ornate double doors, and the scene unfolded before me. Augustus, Orion's father, a man of imposing stature with a neatly trimmed silver beard, was ensconced in a leather armchair, eyes glued to a large flat-screen TV. He offered a brief, polite nod in my direction, a remote control clutched in his hand. And then I saw her, Serafina. She was standing by the fireplace, arranging a vase of freshly cut flowers. Her back was to us initially, but as Orion announced my arrival, she turned. "Lysander is here, Mum." And that's when it happened. Her eyes, a striking shade of hazel, met mine, and in that instant, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. It wasn't a casual glance, nor a polite acknowledgement. It was a look that felt far too intense, far too deep, as if it carried years of unspoken longing, a hidden narrative simmering beneath the surface. It wasn't overtly sexual, not in the crude sense, but it was undeniably charged, a raw, almost desperate vulnerability, mixed with something akin to a profound recognition. My breath hitched. The air grew heavy, thick with an unspoken tension that seemed to emanate solely from her. A strange, unsettling warmth spread through my chest, followed by a prickle of unease. I felt exposed, as if she had somehow seen through me, past the polite smile and the casual demeanor, into something I didn't even know was there. Her lips, painted a soft rose, curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile, but her eyes held a story that neither of us was supposed to uncover. "Lysander, dear," she said, her voice a low, melodic tone that was surprisingly steady despite the tempest in her gaze. "It's so good to see you again, you've grown." I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "Serafina, it's good to see you too. Happy birthday, Orion." I managed to stammer, my eyes darting between her and Orion, who seemed completely oblivious, already engrossed in showing his father the graphic novel. "Thank you, Lysander," she replied, her gaze still locked onto mine for a beat too long before she finally, reluctantly, broke eye contact and turned back to the flowers. But the connection? The strange electric current that had passed between us lingered in the air, a phantom touch on my skin. I felt a flush creep up my neck. What was that? Had I imagined it? Was I projecting something onto a simple greeting? My mind raced, trying to rationalize the unsettling encounter. Serafina was a beautiful woman, certainly. Elegant with a timeless grace that belied her age. Her dark hair, streaked with silver, was impeccably styled, and she carried herself with an air of quiet confidence. But this was Orion's mother, my friend's mother. The thought alone felt sacrilegious, a violation of an unspoken code. "Come on, Lysander, grab a seat," Orion called, pulling me out of my reverie. "Dad's about to tell us how the Jets are going to miraculously win the Super Bowl this year." I forced a laugh, trying to shake off the lingering sensation. I settled onto the plush sofa opposite Augustus, who was now launching into a passionate, if somewhat unrealistic monologue about his favorite football team. Serafina, having finished with the flowers, moved gracefully to the kitchen, her presence still palpable even from the other room. Throughout the next hour, as Orion and I chatted about college, our upcoming exams, and our plans for the winter break, I found myself acutely aware of Serafina's movements. She re-entered the living room with a tray of appetizers, artisanal cheeses, crackers, and a bowl of olives. As she offered the tray to me, her fingers brushed mine, a fleeting contact that sent another jolt through me. Her eyes, again, held that same intensity, that same unspoken depth. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but to me, it felt like a spotlight. I took a cracker, my hand trembling slightly. "Thank you, Serafina," I murmured, trying to keep my voice even. "Of course, dear," she replied, her voice soft, almost a whisper. She lingered for a moment, her gaze sweeping over my face, before moving on to offer the tray to Augustus, who barely looked up from the game. Orion, meanwhile, was oblivious. He was excitedly recounting a particularly embarrassing incident from our last fraternity party, his laughter filling the room. I tried to focus on his story, to participate in the light-hearted banter, but a part of my mind was constantly on high alert, analyzing every glance, every gesture from Serafina. Was I going crazy? Was I misinterpreting a kind, maternal gaze? Perhaps she was just a very expressive person. But no, this felt different. It felt personal, directed, almost intimate. It was as if she was communicating something to me, a silent message that bypassed words entirely. Dinner was a slightly more formal affair. We moved to the dining room, a grand space with a long mahogany table. Serafina had prepared a delicious roast chicken, accompanied by roasted vegetables and a fresh salad. Augustus, now away from the TV, engaged us in conversation about current events and our academic pursuits. He was a successful lawyer, intelligent and articulate, but his demeanor was somewhat reserved, almost detached. He spoke to Serafina with a polite formality, a stark contrast to the warmth she exuded, even if that warmth felt unsettlingly directed at me. "So, Lysander, how are your studies going?" Augustus asked, cutting into his chicken. "Still planning on that pre-med track?" "Yes, sir," I replied, trying to sound confident. "It's challenging, but I'm enjoying it." "Good, good. A noble profession." He nodded, taking a sip of water. Serafina, seated at the opposite end of the table, across from Augustus, watched me intently as I spoke. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth, her eyes never leaving my face. It was unnerving. I felt a strange mix of flattery and profound discomfort. It was like being under a microscope, every word, every gesture scrutinized. "Lysander has always been so dedicated," Serafina interjected, her voice soft. "I remember Orion telling me about his study habits in freshman year. Very impressive." Orion grinned. "Yeah, Lysander's the reason I passed organic chemistry. He basically tutored me through it." "Oh, I wouldn't say that," I demurred, feeling my cheeks warm. "Nonsense," Serafina said, a faint smile playing on her lips. "It's a testament to your character, Lysander, to help a friend so selflessly." Augustus cleared his throat, a subtle sound that seemed to cut through the air. Indeed, friendship is a valuable asset. His tone was neutral, but I detected a slight edge, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Was he noticing? Or was it just my heightened paranoia? The conversation shifted to Orion's upcoming internship, and I tried to contribute to appear normal, but my mind kept replaying Serafina's glances, her words, the way she seemed to hang on my every utterance. It was a bizarre dance, a silent, unspoken communication happening beneath the surface of polite conversation. As the evening wore on, the initial shock began to morph into a gnawing curiosity. What was it about me? What was she seeing? Or was it something entirely within her, a projection of her own internal world? I found myself stealing glances at her when I thought no one was looking, trying to decipher the enigma that was Serafina. She was attentive to everyone, a gracious hostess, but there was always that extra layer when her attention turned to me. At one point, Orion excused himself to take a call from his girlfriend, leaving me alone with Augustus and Serafina in the living room. Augustus had returned to his armchair, ostensibly reading a newspaper, though I suspected he was just waiting for the game to resume. Serafina, however, approached me. "Lysander, would you care for another slice of pie?" she asked, holding a plate with a generous slice of apple pie. "Oh no, thank you, Serafina. I'm quite full," I replied, trying to maintain a respectful distance. She paused, her hand still extended. "Are you sure it's homemade?" Her eyes again held that familiar, unsettling depth. "You seem a little preoccupied tonight, dear. Is everything all right?" The question caught me off guard. Was I that transparent? "Oh no, I'm fine," I quickly assured her. "Just a long week with classes, you know." She nodded slowly, her gaze lingering. "Of course, college can be demanding, but you handle it with such grace." She finally lowered the plate, placing it on the coffee table. "You remind me a little of myself, actually, always striving for excellence, always carrying a certain intensity." My heart hammered against my ribs. Intensity. Was that what she saw, or was it what she felt? The conversation felt dangerously close to crossing an invisible line. I glanced at Augustus, who was still behind his newspaper, seemingly oblivious. "Thank you, Serafina," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. "That's kind of you to say." She smiled, a genuine warm smile this time, but the depth in her eyes remained. "It's simply the truth, Lysander." She then turned and walked back towards the kitchen, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts and the rustling of Augustus's newspaper. I spent the rest of the evening in a state of heightened awareness, trying to act normal, to participate in the conversations, but always with that undercurrent of unease. The more I tried to dismiss it, the more persistent the feeling became. It wasn't just a look, it was a presence, an unspoken narrative that seemed to follow me, to envelop me. As the night drew to a close and Orion walked me to my car, the crisp autumn air felt like a welcome relief. "Thanks for coming, man," Orion said, clapping me on the shoulder. It meant a lot. "Any time, buddy. Happy birthday again." I got into my car, starting the engine. As I backed out of the driveway, I glanced up at the house. The porch light was on, casting a warm glow. And there, standing by the living room window, was Serafina. She wasn't waving or smiling. She was just standing there, watching me. Her silhouette was framed by the light, and even from that distance, I could feel the weight of her gaze. It was the same look, the same intensity, the same unspoken desire that had first unsettled me hours ago. I drove away, the image burned into my mind. The quiet suburban street, the turning leaves, the elegant house, and the woman in the window, her eyes holding a secret I was now desperate to understand. The ordinary afternoon had turned into something profoundly unsettling, something that had irrevocably shifted my perception of Orion's mother, and perhaps of myself. I knew with a chilling certainty that this was just the beginning. The drive home that night was a blur of streetlights and the rhythmic hum of my old sedan. My mind, however, was anything but calm. Serafina's image, framed in the window, was seared into my memory. A silent, enigmatic sentinel. The unsettling intensity of her gaze, the unspoken message in her eyes, it all swirled in my head, refusing to dissipate. I tried to rationalize it, to dismiss it as an overactive imagination, a misinterpretation of a kind woman's attention, but the feeling in my gut, that cold knot of unease, told a different story. The next few days were a strange blend of normalcy and a heightened sense of awareness. Classes, assignments, the usual college grind. I went through the motions, but a part of my mind was constantly replaying the events of Orion's birthday. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt a jolt of apprehension, half expecting it to be a message from Serafina, though I couldn't articulate what such a message would even say. It was a ridiculous thought, I knew. She was Orion's mother, my friend's mother. The very idea felt like a betrayal, a transgression of an unspoken boundary. I didn't tell anyone. How could I? How do you explain to your best friend that you think his mother is looking at you with an unsettling, almost desirous intensity? It sounded insane, like something out of a cheap thriller. Orion, bless his oblivious heart, called me the next day gushing about the graphic novel and thanking me again. He mentioned his mom had said I was such a polite young man and that she enjoyed my company. He delivered it with a casualness that only highlighted the chasm between his perception and mine. "Yeah, she's always liked you, Lysander," he'd said, completely unaware of the internal turmoil his words ignited. "You're like the son she never had, probably because I'm such a mess." He laughed, and I forced a chuckle, the sound hollow even to my own ears. A week passed. The initial intensity of the feeling began to wane, replaced by a dull throb of lingering confusion. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe I was just tired, stressed, and reading too much into things. I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, a figment of my own anxieties. Then came the text message. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a dreary, overcast day, and I was holed up in the library trying to make sense of a particularly dense chapter on organic chemistry. My phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. My heart gave a strange lurch. I almost ignored it, but something compelled me to open it. The message read, "Hello, Lysander. This is Serafina. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. Orion mentioned you were struggling with a particular concept in organic chemistry. I remember Augustus had a fantastic textbook on the subject from his university days. Would you be interested in borrowing it? It might offer a different perspective. S." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. How did she get my number? Orion, obviously. He probably gave it to her without a second thought, assuming it was a kind, maternal gesture. And it was a kind gesture on the surface. But the memory of her gaze, the unsettling intensity, made every word feel loaded. I typed a reply, trying to keep it polite and neutral. "Hello, Serafina. Thank you, that's very thoughtful of you. I appreciate the offer, but I think I'm starting to get the hang of it. No need to trouble yourselves." Her reply came almost instantly. "Nonsense, dear, it's no trouble at all. Augustus keeps his old textbooks in his study. I could drop it off at your dorm sometime this week if that's convenient for you. Or perhaps you could stop by for a quick coffee. I'm sure Orion would love to see you too." The mention of Orion would love to see you too felt like a strategic shield, a way to make the invitation seem innocuous, but the offer to drop it off at my dorm or stop by for coffee felt like an escalation. It wasn't just about the textbook anymore. It was about creating an opportunity for another encounter. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. I couldn't just ignore her. That would be rude and potentially awkward for Orion, but I also didn't want to encourage whatever this was. "That's very kind, Serafina," I typed, choosing my words carefully. "But I'm swamped with deadlines this week. Perhaps another time. Thank you again for thinking of me." I hit send, feeling a wave of relief mixed with a lingering sense of unease. I hoped that would be the end of it. For a few days, it was. I immersed myself in my studies, trying to push Serafina and her unsettling gaze to the back of my mind. Then, the following Saturday, I received another text. This time, it was a picture. A photo of a beautifully arranged platter of homemade cookies, still warm, judging by the slight steam visible. The caption read, "Just baked these. Thought of you. You mentioned you liked oatmeal raisin, didn't you? S." My stomach clenched. Oatmeal raisin was my favorite. I had mentioned it once casually months ago during a conversation at Orion's house about favorite desserts. The fact that she remembered and then acted on it felt incredibly personal. It wasn't just a kind gesture anymore. It felt like a deliberate, almost intimate act of remembrance. I stared at the picture, a knot forming in my chest. This was getting out of hand. I couldn't keep deflecting her. It was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain the illusion of normalcy. I knew I had to address it, but how? How do you tell your friend's mother that her attention is making you uncomfortable without sounding like an arrogant jerk, or worse, completely misinterpreting her intentions and causing a massive rift? I decided to try a different approach. I called Orion. "Hey man," I said, trying to sound casual. "How's it going?" "Good, good." Just chilling, playing some video games. What's up? Nothing much, just your mom texted me a picture of some cookies she baked, said she thought of me. There was a pause on the other end. Oh yeah? That's Mom for you. She's always baking. She probably just remembered you liked oatmeal raisin. She's got a memory like an elephant for that kind of stuff. He chuckled. You should totally go over and grab some. They're probably amazing. His complete lack of suspicion was both a relief and a source of profound frustration. He saw nothing wrong with it. To him, it was just Serafina being Serafina, the warm, nurturing mother. And maybe, just maybe, he was right. Maybe I was overthinking everything. But the feeling persisted, a quiet hum of discord beneath the surface. Yeah, maybe, I said, trying to sound convinced. Anyway, I gotta run. Got a paper due. I hung up, feeling no closer to a solution. Orion's innocent interpretation only made me feel more isolated in my discomfort. It was clear he wouldn't understand, and trying to explain would only make me sound paranoid. The next few weeks became a subtle game of cat and mouse. Serafina would send a text, a recipe she thought I'd like, a link to an article about a medical breakthrough relevant to my pre-med studies, or simply a "Hope you're having a good week, dear." Each message was innocuous on its own, easily dismissed as friendly maternal concern. But taken together, and coupled with the memory of her gaze, they formed a pattern that felt increasingly deliberate. I always replied politely, briefly, trying to keep my distance without being overtly rude. I never initiated contact. I never asked questions that would prolong the conversation. I was walking a tightrope, trying to navigate this bizarre situation without causing offense or worse, encouraging something I couldn't define. One afternoon, as I was leaving the campus library, I saw her. She was parked across the street, in a sleek, dark sedan that I recognized as hers. She was sitting in the driver's seat, seemingly engrossed in her phone. But as I walked past, she looked up and our eyes met. That look, again. It was a flash, a momentary connection that lasted only a second, but it was enough. The same intensity, the same depth, the same unspoken longing. She offered a small, almost shy smile, and then quickly looked away, pretending to be busy with her phone again. My heart pounded. Was she waiting for me? Had she known I would be there? The library was a common spot for students, but it felt too coincidental. The air was crisp, the autumn leaves crunching under my feet, but I felt a sudden chill. I quickened my pace, my mind racing. This wasn't just a few texts anymore. This was a physical presence, a deliberate appearance. It felt like she was seeking me out, creating these chance encounters. Later that week, Orion invited me over for a movie night. "Mum's making her famous lasagna," he said, trying to entice me. "You know you can't resist." I hesitated. The thought of being in that house again, under Serafina's watchful eye, filled me with a fresh wave of anxiety. But refusing too many invitations would raise questions, especially from Orion. I couldn't avoid her forever without making things awkward. "Sounds good, man," I finally said, trying to sound enthusiastic. "What time?" That evening, as I drove back to Orion's house, the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple. The familiar colonial house loomed ahead, a beacon of warmth and for me a source of growing apprehension. This time, when I rang the doorbell, Orion answered, his usual cheerful self. "Lysander, come on in, the lasagna's almost ready." As I stepped inside, the aroma of garlic, herbs, and simmering tomato sauce filled the air. Augustus was in the living room, watching the news, his presence a quiet, almost somber anchor in the house. Serafina emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Lysander, dear, so glad you could make it," she said, her voice warm, her smile radiant. Her eyes, however, held that familiar, unsettling depth. It was a subtle shift, a flicker that only I seemed to perceive, but it was there. It was always there. "Hello, Serafina," I replied, trying to meet her gaze without flinching. "The house smells amazing." "Oh, you flatter me," she chuckled, but her eyes lingered on mine for a moment longer than necessary. "Go on, make yourself comfortable. Orion, why don't you get Lysander a drink?" Throughout dinner, the dynamic was similar to my last visit. Augustus was polite but reserved, occasionally interjecting with a comment about politics or the economy. Orion was boisterous, recounting anecdotes from campus life, and Serafina was the gracious hostess, attentive to everyone, but with an undeniable focus on me. She refilled my water glass before I even realized it was half empty. She offered me a second helping of lasagna, her hand resting lightly on my arm for a beat too long as she did so. Her questions were always directed at me about my studies, my plans, my well-being. It was subtle, yes, but the cumulative effect was overwhelming. At one point, Orion was talking about a particularly challenging professor. Man, Professor Davies is brutal. His exams are impossible. "Oh, I remember Professor Davies," Serafina interjected, her gaze fixed on me. "He was a guest lecturer at a seminar Augustus attended years ago. Very intelligent, but yes, quite demanding. Lysander, how are you finding his class?" I swallowed, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "It's tough, but I'm managing." "I'm sure you are," she said, her voice soft, almost a murmur. "You have a remarkable intellect, Lysander, and a quiet strength about you." Augustus cleared his throat, a sound that seemed to cut through the air like a knife. He didn't look at Serafina, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Orion, however, was completely engrossed in his food, oblivious to the undercurrents. I felt a strange mix of emotions, flattery certainly, who wouldn't appreciate such compliments? But it was overshadowed by a profound sense of discomfort and guilt. This was my friend's mother. This was wrong. And yet, there was a part of me, a small, dark corner, that was intrigued, even a little flattered by the attention. It was a dangerous thought, and I immediately pushed it away, disgusted with myself. After dinner, we moved to the living room for the movie. Orion had chosen an action flick, full of explosions and car chases. Augustus predictably fell asleep in his armchair within the first 20 minutes. Serafina sat on the sofa opposite me, with Orion sprawled out on the floor between us. As the movie played, I became acutely aware of Serafina's presence. I could feel her eyes on me even when I wasn't looking. I tried to focus on the screen, to lose myself in the explosions, but her gaze was a constant, unsettling weight. At one point, Orion got up to get more popcorn, leaving me alone with Serafina and the sleeping Augustus. The room was dimly lit by the flickering light of the TV. "Lysander," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the movie's soundtrack. I turned my head, my heart pounding. "Yes, Serafina?" She leaned forward slightly, her eyes shining in the dim light. "Are you truly all right? You seem troubled. You can talk to me, you know. Sometimes it helps to confide in someone outside your immediate circle." Her words were kind, maternal even, but the way she said them, the intensity in her gaze, the subtle tilt of her head, it all felt loaded. It felt like an invitation, not just to talk, but to something more. I hesitated, searching for the right words. "I appreciate that, Serafina, really, but I'm fine, just a lot on my plate with school." She nodded slowly, her gaze still fixed on me. "Of course, I understand. But remember, if you ever need anything at all, my door is always open." Her voice dropped even lower, almost a conspiratorial whisper. "Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who understand us the least." The implication hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Was she talking about Augustus, about Orion, or was she talking about herself, about a secret she carried? My mind reeled. The audacity of the statement, the raw vulnerability it implied, was startling. Before I could respond, Orion returned, a large bowl of popcorn in his hands. "All right, who's ready for some more action?" he announced, completely oblivious to the silent, charged exchange that had just taken place. Serafina immediately straightened up, her expression shifting back to one of polite warmth. The moment was gone, swallowed by the mundane, but the words and the look that accompanied them resonated deep within me. I spent the rest of the movie in a daze, the explosions on screen doing little to distract from the internal turmoil. Her words, "Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who understand us the least," echoed in my mind. What did she mean? Was she unhappy? Was she lonely? And why was she confiding or attempting to confide in me? As the movie ended, and Augustus stirred awake, stretching with a grunt, I knew I couldn't keep pretending this wasn't happening. The subtle advances, the intense gazes, the loaded whispers, they were becoming too frequent, too personal. I was caught in a web of unspoken desires and hidden meanings, and I had no idea how to escape without tearing everything apart. If you're finding this story as captivating as I am, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more compelling narratives like this to life. When it was time to leave, Serafina walked me to the door. Orion was in the kitchen, cleaning up. Augustus had retreated to his study. We were alone in the grand entryway, the soft glow of the chandelier casting long shadows. "Thank you for coming, Lysander," she said, her voice soft. "It truly brightens our evening when you visit. Thank you for having me, Serafina. The lasagna was incredible." She reached out, her hand gently touching my arm, her fingers lingering for a moment. "You're a good young man, Lysander. A very good young man." Her eyes, in the dim light, held that familiar unsettling depth, a silent plea, a burning question. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I nodded, unable to meet her gaze for long. "Good night, Serafina." "Good night, dear," she whispered, her hand slowly retracting. I practically fled to my car, the crisp night air a welcome shock against my flushed face. As I drove away, I didn't look back at the window. I couldn't. The weight of her gaze, even imagined, was too much. I was no longer just a friend visiting a friend's house. I was a participant in a silent, unsettling drama, and I had no idea what the next act would bring. The lines were blurring, the boundaries shifting, and I felt a terrifying sense of being drawn into something I didn't understand, something that felt both forbidden and strangely compelling. The drive home after the movie night was a suffocating silence, broken only by the hum of my engine and the frantic beating of my own heart. Serafina's words, "Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who understand us the least," echoed in my mind, a chilling mantra. What did she mean? Was it a confession of her own loneliness, a veiled criticism of Augustus, or something far more personal directed at me? The ambiguity was tormenting. I felt like I was drowning in unspoken subtext, every interaction with her a minefield of hidden meanings. The crisp autumn air, usually a welcome balm, now felt sharp and invasive, mirroring the prickle of anxiety under my skin. I knew with a terrifying certainty that I couldn't ignore this any longer. The subtle glances, the lingering touches, the loaded whispers, they were no longer just unsettling, they were becoming a tangible presence in my life, a shadow that followed me even when I was miles away from her house. The next few days were a blur of restless nights and distracted days. My studies, usually a source of focus, became a struggle. I found myself staring at textbooks, the words blurring into an incomprehensible mess, my mind replaying every interaction with Serafina. The guilt was a heavy cloak. Guilt for feeling uncomfortable, guilt for even considering the implications of her attention, and guilt for not knowing how to handle it without betraying Orion's trust. I started making excuses to Orion. When he invited me to study at his place, I claimed a mountain of assignments. When he suggested grabbing a coffee, I said I had a prior engagement. I hated lying to him, but the thought of being in Serafina's presence again, of enduring another evening under her intense gaze, filled me with dread. Orion, ever the good-natured friend, seemed to accept my excuses without question, though I could sense a slight disappointment in his voice. "Everything all right, man?" he asked one afternoon over the phone. "You've been a bit scarce lately." "Yeah, just swamped," I lied, running a hand through my hair. "Professor Davies is really piling it on." "Tell me about it," he commiserated. "Well, whenever you're free, let me know. We should definitely catch up properly." "Definitely," I said, a hollow feeling in my chest. I was pushing him away, and it felt terrible, but I couldn't see another way to create distance from his mother without directly confronting the issue, which felt impossible. Then the texts from Serafina intensified. They became more frequent, more personal. No longer just recipes or articles, but questions about my day, my mood, my feelings. "Hope you're not working too hard, Lysander. Remember to take breaks. Your well-being is important. S. Thinking of you today. The weather is so gloomy, perfect for a warm cup of tea and a good book. Are you finding time for yourself? S." Each message was a delicate thread, weaving a web around me. They were caring, solicitous, but the underlying current of something more was undeniable. I replied with increasing brevity, trying to convey a polite but firm boundary. "Thank you, Serafina. I'm fine. Busy day. Appreciate the thought. All good here." I felt like a coward, unable to directly address the elephant in the room. But what could I say? "Please stop texting me. Your attention makes me uncomfortable." It felt too harsh, too accusatory, and too likely to blow up in my face, potentially damaging my friendship with Orion beyond repair. One afternoon, as I was walking back to my dorm from a particularly grueling lab session, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but a strange premonition made me pick up. "Hello? Lysander, it's Serafina." Her voice was soft, a little hesitant. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." My heart leaped into my throat. She had never called before. "No, not at all, Serafina. Is everything all right? I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could feel the tremor in my hand. Yes, everything is fine, she said, a slight pause. I was wondering if you might be free for a moment. I'm actually in the area running some errands, and I thought perhaps we could grab a quick coffee. My treat, of course. I know you've been so busy, and I haven't seen you in a while. My stomach dropped. She was in the area. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a deliberate attempt to engineer a private meeting. My mind raced, trying to conjure another excuse. Oh, Serafina, I'm so sorry, I stammered, my voice sounding strained even to my own ears. I literally just got back from a lab, and I have another one starting in 20 minutes. I really can't. It was a lie, but a plausible one. There was a moment of silence on her end, a silence that felt heavy with disappointment. Oh, I see. That's a shame. Well, perhaps another time then. Her voice was still soft, but there was a subtle shift, a hint of something wounded. Yes, another time, I quickly agreed, desperate to end the call. Thank you for thinking of me, though. Of course, dear, she replied, her voice regaining a touch of its usual warmth, but the underlying sadness was still there. You take care, Lysander. You too, Serafina, goodbye. I hung up, my hand trembling. I leaned against a brick wall, taking deep, shaky breaths. This was getting out of control. Her persistence, her deliberate attempts to seek me out, were becoming increasingly difficult to deflect. I felt a growing sense of panic. What if she didn't take no for an answer? What if she showed up at my dorm? The thought sent a shiver of genuine fear down my spine. The weather mirrored my internal turmoil. The golden hues of autumn had given way to the stark, skeletal branches of winter. The days grew shorter, the air colder, and a persistent, biting wind seemed to strip the landscape bare. It felt like everything was being exposed, laid vulnerable to the elements. A few days later, I received an email. It was from Serafina. The subject line read, "A thought for you." I opened it with trepidation. It was a link to an article about a renowned surgeon, a pioneer in his field, who had overcome significant personal challenges to achieve his success. Below the link, she had written, "Lysander, I read this and immediately thought of you. Your dedication, your quiet strength, your ambition, they remind me so much of the qualities described in this man. I truly believe you are destined for great things. It takes a special kind of person to pursue a path of service and healing, and I see that in you. I hope you find some inspiration in his story, as I did. With warmest regards, Serafina." The email was meticulously crafted, seemingly innocent yet deeply personal. It wasn't just a casual share, it was an analysis of my character, a projection of her admiration, and a subtle reinforcement of the idea that she saw me, truly saw me, in a way others didn't. It was flattering, yes, but also deeply unsettling. It felt like she was building a narrative around me, a narrative that positioned me as someone unique, someone worthy of her special attention. I didn't reply to the email. I couldn't. I felt a profound sense of exhaustion, a weariness that went beyond academic stress. I was tired of the constant vigilance, the careful navigation of her subtle advances. I needed a break, a respite from the unspoken drama. The upcoming Thanksgiving break offered a temporary reprieve. I planned to go home to my parents, a few hours away, and immerse myself in the comfort of family and familiar routines. I told Orion I wouldn't be around, and he understood. "Have a good break, man," he said. "Eat lots of turkey. We'll catch up when we get back." I breathed a sigh of relief. A week away. A week of no texts, no calls, no unexpected encounters. I desperately needed to clear my head, to gain some perspective. However, my respite was short-lived. 2 days into my break, as I was helping my mom decorate for the holidays, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Serafina. "Happy Thanksgiving, Lysander. I hope you're enjoying time with your family. We missed you at our dinner. Orion mentioned you were home. I hope you're getting some much-needed rest. S." My blood ran cold. "We missed you at our dinner. Orion mentioned you were home." It was a subtle reminder that she knew where I was, that she was still thinking of me even when I was miles away. The boundary I had tried to establish, the distance I had tried to create, felt utterly permeable. I didn't reply. I couldn't bring myself to. The thought of her sitting at her Thanksgiving table, thinking of me, felt like an invasion of my private space, even from a distance. I felt a surge of anger, quickly followed by guilt. Was I being unfair? Was she just being kind? But the persistent, unsettling feeling told me otherwise. When I returned to campus after the break, the air was even colder. The first dusting of snow already clinging to the ground. Finals were looming, and the campus was buzzing with a nervous energy. I tried to focus, to bury myself in my books, but Serafina's presence, even in her absence, felt palpable. Then one evening, as I was walking back from the library, a car pulled up beside me. It was Serafina's dark sedan. The window rolled down, revealing her smiling face. "Lysander, what a coincidence," she said, her voice warm, but her eyes held that familiar, intense glint. "I was just dropping off some things for Orion. Can I offer you a ride? It's quite chilly out." My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a coincidence, this was deliberate. She knew my routine, she knew I walked back from the library around this time. "Oh no, thank you, Serafina," I said, trying to sound polite but firm. "I'm almost there. I could use the walk." She paused, her smile faltering slightly. "Are you sure? It's no trouble at all, I insist." Her gaze was unwavering, a silent challenge. I felt a surge of desperation. I couldn't get in that car with her. Not alone. "No, really, I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "But thank you for the offer." She held my gaze for a long moment, a silent battle of wills. Then, with a sigh that was almost imperceptible, she nodded. "Very well, dear, but do be careful in this weather. It's getting treacherous." "I will," I said, already walking away, my pace quickening. As I walked, I could feel her eyes on my back, watching me until I turned the corner. I didn't dare look back. The encounter left me shaken. Her persistence was escalating. The subtle hints were becoming less subtle, the boundaries increasingly blurred. I knew I had to talk to someone. But who? Not Orion. He wouldn't understand. My parents? How would I even begin to explain this bizarre situation? I felt utterly alone, trapped in a situation I hadn't asked for and didn't know how to escape. The pressure of finals, combined with the emotional toll of Serafina's attention, began to wear me down. I was sleeping less, eating less, and my grades, usually stellar, started to slip. I felt a constant knot of anxiety in my stomach, a pervasive sense of dread. One evening, after a particularly bad exam, I found myself walking aimlessly around campus, the cold wind biting at my exposed skin. I felt a profound sense of isolation. I missed the easy camaraderie with Orion, the simple, uncomplicated friendship we once shared. Now even that felt tainted by the unspoken drama surrounding his mother. As I walked past the student union, I saw Orion sitting at a table with a group of friends, laughing, completely at ease. A pang of envy shot through me. He was oblivious, living his life while I was caught in this strange, unsettling web. I decided then and there that I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. I needed to talk to someone, even if it wasn't Orion. I needed an outside perspective, a voice of reason. But who? The answer came to me in a flash of desperate clarity. Augustus. The thought was terrifying. Confronting Augustus, Serafina's husband, about his wife's behavior towards me felt like an act of war, a direct challenge that could have catastrophic consequences. But he was the only other adult in the equation, the only one who might understand or at least be able to do something about it. He was reserved, yes, but he also exuded an air of quiet authority. Perhaps he had noticed something. Perhaps he was as uncomfortable as I was. The idea was audacious, dangerous even. It could backfire spectacularly, alienating me from Orion and his entire family. But the alternative, continuing to endure Serafina's escalating attention in silence, felt even worse. I was at my breaking point. I spent the next few days agonizing over how to approach him. I couldn't just call him out of the blue. It had to be subtle, carefully worded, and most importantly, private. I needed to create an opportunity, a chance encounter that wouldn't raise suspicion. The opportunity presented itself a few days before Christmas break. Orion mentioned that his father was hosting a small, informal gathering for some colleagues at their house. "It's mostly old guys talking about boring legal stuff," Orion had said, rolling his eyes. "But Mom's making some amazing hors d'oeuvres. You should totally swing by for a bit, grab some food, say hi. You don't have to stay long." My stomach clenched. Another visit to the house, another encounter with Serafina. But this time it was different. This time I had a purpose. This time I was going in with a plan. It was a risky gamble, but I felt a desperate need to regain some control over the situation. The evening of the gathering arrived, cold and clear, the air biting. I dressed carefully, trying to project an air of calm confidence I didn't feel. As I drove to Orion's house, the familiar colonial, now adorned with festive lights, seemed to glow with an almost sinister warmth. I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The house was filled with the low murmur of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the faint scent of pine and expensive cologne. Orion opened the door, a surprised but welcoming smile on his face. "Lysander, you actually came. Awesome, man. Come on in." He led me into the bustling living room where a dozen or so adults, mostly men in suits, were mingling. Augustus was holding court by the fireplace, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, engaged in a serious discussion with a few other distinguished-looking gentlemen. Serafina, elegant in a dark dress, moved gracefully through the crowd, offering trays of appetizers, her smile radiant. She saw me almost immediately. Her eyes across the crowded room met mine. And in that instant, the noise of the party seemed to fade, the other guests blurring into the background. That look, it was there again, that same unsettling intensity, that same unspoken depth. But this time, it was accompanied by a flash of surprise and perhaps a hint of triumph. She started to move towards me, a slow, deliberate path through the mingling guests. My heart pounded. This was it. This was my chance. I had to find Augustus, and I had to do it before Serafina reached me. "Lysander, dear," she said, her voice reaching me just as I began to move. "I'm so glad you could make it." But I didn't stop. I offered her a quick, polite nod, and then with a surge of adrenaline, I made a beeline for Augustus, my eyes fixed on him, my mind racing. This was my only shot. If you're on the edge of your seat, wondering what Lysander will do next, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these stories coming. The air in the living room, thick with the scent of pine and expensive perfume, seemed to crackle with an unspoken tension as I made my move. Serafina's voice calling my name felt like a physical hand reaching out, trying to pull me back, but I pushed through, my eyes locked on Augustus, who was still deep in conversation by the fireplace. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat urging me forward. This was it. No turning back. I reached Augustus, interrupting his conversation with a polite but firm, "Excuse me, Mr. Thaddeus." Augustus turned, his silver beard neatly trimmed, his eyes, usually reserved, now holding a flicker of surprise at my sudden appearance. "Lysander, what a pleasant surprise. I didn't expect you to make it." He offered a brief, almost imperceptible nod to his colleagues, excusing himself from their discussion. "I apologize for interrupting, sir," I began, my voice a little shaky, but I forced myself to maintain eye contact. "But I was hoping I could speak with you for a moment, in private, if possible." Augustus raised an eyebrow, a subtle shift in his expression. He glanced over my shoulder, and I knew without looking that he was looking at Serafina. I could feel her presence, a burning intensity from across the room. "Of course, Lysander," Augustus said, his voice calm, but with an underlying note of curiosity. "Let's step into my study. It's quieter there." He led the way, a man of quiet authority, through a less crowded hallway towards a heavy oak door. As we walked, I risked a quick glance back. Serafina was standing still, a tray of appetizers forgotten in her hand, her eyes fixed on me, a mixture of confusion and something akin to betrayal etched on her face. The triumph I had seen earlier had vanished, replaced by a chilling realization. She knew, or at least she suspected. The study was a sanctuary of dark wood, leather-bound books, and the faint scent of pipe tobacco. Augustus closed the door behind us, the click echoing in the sudden silence. He gestured to one of the two leather armchairs facing a large, ornate desk. "Please, Lysander, have a seat." He settled into the other armchair, his gaze steady, expectant. "Now, what is it that's so urgent you had to pull me away from my guests?" His tone was not unkind, but it was direct. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts, to choose my words with the utmost care. This was delicate. This was dangerous. "Mr. Thaddeus, I apologize again for the intrusion, especially during your gathering, but I felt it was important to speak with you, and I wasn't sure how else to do it privately." He nodded, a silent invitation to continue. "It's about Serafina," I finally managed, the name feeling heavy on my tongue. Augustus's expression remained impassive, but I saw a subtle tightening around his eyes, a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher. "My wife?" he prompted, his voice even. "Yes, sir. Over the past few weeks since Orion's birthday, I've noticed a change in her behavior towards me. It's subtle, but it's become increasingly personal. The way she looks at me, the texts, the calls, the unexpected appearances, it's making me uncomfortable, Mr. Thaddeus. I laid it out, carefully, avoiding any accusatory language, focusing solely on my own feelings and observations. I described the intense gazes, the lingering touches, the loaded compliments, the texts about my well-being, the coincidental meeting outside the library, the phone call inviting me for coffee, and finally, the email. I even mentioned her comment about the people closest to us understanding us the least. I tried to be factual, objective, presenting a pattern rather than an isolated incident. Augustus listened, his face a mask of controlled composure. He didn't interrupt, didn't react, just listened, his eyes never leaving mine. The silence in the room was deafening, punctuated only by the distant murmur of the party. When I finished, the silence stretched, heavy and pregnant with unspoken implications. I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me, the adrenaline beginning to recede. I had said my piece. The ball was now in his court. Finally, Augustus leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped in front of him. "Lysander," he began, his voice low, almost a murmur. "I appreciate your candor. This is a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation, sir," I quickly interjected, my voice firm. "It's an observation of behavior that is making me deeply uncomfortable. I value my friendship with Orion immensely, and I respect you and Seraphina. I would never want to cause any trouble, but I felt I had no choice but to bring this to your attention." He studied me for a long moment, his gaze piercing. "You believe my wife is pursuing you?" The directness of the question made me flinch. "I believe her attention towards me has become inappropriate and unsettling, sir. I don't know her intentions, but the effect it's having on me is significant. I've tried to create distance, to politely deflect, but it hasn't worked." Augustus leaned back, a deep sigh escaping his lips. He ran a hand over his beard, his eyes distant as if lost in thought. "Seraphina, she has always been a woman of deep emotions, Lysander, and sometimes those emotions can be misdirected, or perhaps misunderstood." He paused, his gaze returning to mine, a flicker of something akin to weariness in his eyes. "I have noticed a certain change in her recently, a restlessness, a yearning for something more, perhaps. I confess I hadn't connected it to you." His words, though vague, confirmed my suspicions. He had noticed something. He wasn't entirely oblivious. A small spark of hope ignited within me. "I understand this is difficult to hear, sir," I said, trying to sound empathetic, "and I truly regret having to be the one to tell you, but I felt it was necessary for everyone involved." Augustus nodded slowly. "I did the right thing, Lysander. It takes courage to speak up about something like this, especially when it involves someone close to your friend." He paused again, his gaze fixed on a point beyond me, as if contemplating a complex legal case. "Seraphina and I, we have our own complexities, as all long-term relationships do. There are unspoken things, unmet needs. I believe she may be projecting some of those onto you, a young man with ambition and a certain earnestness that she perhaps finds appealing." His honesty, though painful, was a relief. He wasn't dismissing me. He was acknowledging the possibility, even offering a psychological explanation. "What do you intend to do, sir?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Augustus looked at me, his expression hardening slightly, a flash of his professional resolve. "I will speak with my wife, Lysander. This cannot continue. It is inappropriate, and it is causing distress. I will ensure that this attention ceases." He stood up, a clear signal that our conversation was drawing to a close. "I appreciate your discretion in this matter. I trust you will not discuss this with Orion or anyone else." "Of course, sir," I replied, standing as well. "My lips are sealed." "Good." He walked to the door, then paused, his hand on the knob. "Lysander, I want to thank you. This was not an easy conversation, but it was a necessary one. You've handled yourself with maturity and integrity." A wave of relief washed over me, so profound it almost brought me to my knees. I had done it. I had spoken my truth, and it had been received with understanding, not anger. "Thank you, Mr. Thaddeus," I said, genuinely grateful. He opened the door, and the sounds of the party immediately flooded back in. As we stepped out, I saw Seraphina. She was standing near the entrance to the study, a glass of wine in her hand, her back to the main party. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, were fixed on us. There was no mistaking the look now, a mixture of fear, hurt, and a deep, profound sadness. She had been waiting. She had known. Augustus met her gaze, a silent, charged exchange passing between them. He didn't say anything, just a subtle tightening of his jaw, a slight inclination of his head. But the message was clear. He knew. Serafina's eyes then flickered to me, a fleeting glance that held a raw, wounded vulnerability. It wasn't the intense, desirous gaze from before. It was something broken, something exposed. I felt a pang of guilt, a sharp stab of empathy. I hadn't wanted to hurt her. I had only wanted to stop the unsettling attention. I quickly made my excuses to Orion, claiming a sudden headache, and left the party. As I drove away, I didn't look back at the house. The festive lights now seemed to mock the quiet drama unfolding within. The weight on my shoulders had lifted, replaced by a strange mix of relief and melancholy. I had done what I needed to do, but at what cost? The next few days were quiet. No texts from Serafina, no calls. The silence was a stark contrast to the constant stream of messages I had grown accustomed to. It was a relief, certainly, but also a confirmation of the gravity of my conversation with Augustus. Something had shifted in that household. Orion called me a few days later. "Hey man, you okay? You left pretty abruptly the other night." "Yeah, just a killer headache," I lied, feeling a familiar pang of guilt. "Stress from finals, you know." "Totally get it," he said, his voice sounding a little subdued. "Things have been a bit weird here, actually. Mom and Dad have been really quiet, like more quiet than usual. And Mom seems down." My heart sank. "Oh, really? I'm sorry to hear that." "Yeah, I don't know what's up," Orion continued, sounding genuinely puzzled. "They had some kind of big talk after everyone left the other night. She's been spending a lot of time in her garden, even though it's freezing out." I listened, my stomach churning. My actions had consequences. I had brought discomfort, perhaps even pain, into their home. But I also knew I had done what was necessary for my own peace of mind. The Christmas break arrived, and I went home grateful for the distance. I spent the holidays trying to clear my head, to process everything that had happened. The image of Serafina's wounded gaze, the quiet resolve in Augustus's eyes, they lingered, a testament to the complex, often hidden lives people lead. When I returned to campus in January, the world felt a little colder, a little sharper. Orion and I resumed our friendship, but a subtle shift had occurred. I was more guarded, more aware of the unspoken currents beneath the surface of everyday interactions. I still visited his house occasionally, but my visits were shorter, more focused on Orion, and I always made sure Augustus was present. Serafina was always polite, always gracious. Her smile was still warm, her voice still soft, but the intense gaze, the lingering touches, the loaded whispers, they were gone, replaced by a respectful, almost distant cordiality. Her eyes, when they met mine, held a different kind of depth now, a quiet understanding, a shared secret, and perhaps a touch of lingering sadness. The desire was gone, replaced by a resigned acceptance. I never spoke to Orion about it. It was a burden I carried alone, a secret that belonged to me, Augustus, and Serafina. It was a testament to the hidden complexities of human relationships, the unspoken longings that can simmer beneath the surface of even the most ordinary lives. The experience changed me. It taught me about boundaries, about the courage it takes to speak your truth, and about the profound impact of unspoken emotions. I learned that even in the most familiar settings, among the people you think you know best, there can be hidden stories, silent desires, and unexpected depths that can shatter your perception of reality. I continued my pre-med studies, more focused than ever, but with a newfound awareness of the human condition, of the intricate tapestry of emotions that drive us all. The world, I realized, was full of such stories, waiting to be uncovered, waiting to be understood. And sometimes the most profound ones are found not in grand adventures, but in the quiet, unsettling gaze of a friend's mother, a gaze that held a desire she'd been hiding for years. And that concludes our story. If you were as captivated by Lysander's journey as I was, please give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more compelling and realistic stories like this one. Your support means the world and helps us create more content you'll love. Thank you for watching.